Well, good afternoon, everybody. Again, this is Michael Lippert. I'm one of the Associate Directors of Admissions here at Michigan Ross. And I'm glad you're all joining us and taking time out of your day or maybe evening if you're somewhere around the globe. It's an incredible day here in Ann Arbor. So we have a room full of students and staff who are excited to share their experiences, and then we're all going to go outside after. So, or those of us who have finals. But I'm really glad you're joining us here today. This is one of my favorite topics to discuss. I have a nonprofit background personally myself before I joined the admissions team, and I met my wife in the nonprofit world as well. So, when we were looking at MBA programs, or I should say, when my wife was looking at MBA programs and thinking about this process, I think it was really important for her, and as I was helping her through that decision, to find a place where, building your career and going for traditional business roles wasn't mutually exclusive from making an impact and having the ability to get involved in that during your MBA experience and using those skills. And I feel really strongly that Ross was that place for her and all of her classmates. So I'm excited to share the number of different offerings we have here at Ross along those lines. Before I do that, I thought I'd just give a quick update about some of the things that are going around in the building. It's a busy time here, as it often is during the school year. Round one applications have been submitted, and we have a number to go through and a really great application pool. For those of you who are on the line who are waiting to hear back from us, we're reading your applications right now, and we will we will be releasing interview invitations the last couple of days of October. And there'll be interview days all through November here on campus. So keep an eye out on Sujin's blog and get ready to see those interview invitations, fingers crossed. We look forward to reading more about you. We'll also be on the road the next couple of weeks. There are women's brunches in New York, Chicago, and San Francisco. There are multi-school events to just learn more about Ross in New York and DC, LA, and Houston as well. So kind of all around the country. I'll be in India next month. So take a look at our Ross events calendar and come out and see us and meet us in person. And then finally, some of you might have heard, but Stephen Ross, in addition to the $330 million he's already given to the university, made another $50 million gift last month. And that gift is directly towards student support and to bolster our career services and other resources in the building. So we're incredibly fortunate and looking forward to that as well. At a high level, before we go any further, I thought it was important to describe some of that, what Ross is about and the ethos of the school. You see here this mission statement of developing leaders who are going to make a positive difference in the world. And that's, an ethos of the school and everything our curriculum's about. Our dean says, and I love this thought as a motivator throughout the day, is, every problem that the world is facing today, business is going to have a seat at the table towards fixing that problem. So, our students feel that way and have immersed themselves in that. And, in addition to it being a priority for the school now, there's also a lot of history here. And it's something I get really proud of as an alum of the school. But, JFK announced the Peace Corps on the steps of the Michigan Student Union. And LBJ announced the Great Society at a commencement speech here in the Big House in Ann Arbor. And also the base of the pyramid research was founded here at Ross by one of our signature faculty, C.K. Prothalad, during his teaching and research here at Ross. So there's a lot of history for Michigan and Ross and the city of Ann Arbor and what, combining the business world with making an impact in society. And you'll feel that energy, I think, throughout what you hear and throughout your time here as a student if you were to come. The next thing I want to do is you're going to be hearing voices throughout the session from a number of great current students here at Ross. So I want to let them introduce themselves. So when you hear their voice, you have a sense of what they've done and where they're coming from. And we'll start off with Ava.
Thanks, Michael. Hear me? Hi, everyone. My name is Ava Damri. I am a second year from Dallas, Texas. Before coming to Ross, I was in technology consulting. And I came to Ross, actually I attended this exact webinar probably 3 years ago, and where I learned more about Ross's focus on social impact. I'm involved in a variety of things, Ross Open Road, also the Give a Day Fund, and just with my other teammates here that are in the room, I'm really excited to talk to you guys about it.
Hi, Hi, everyone. My name is Colleen Hill. I am currently a second year at Ross of 3 years. I'm a dual degree with URB, the School of Environment and Sustainability. And before Ross, I was working at Veritas Prep in Los Angeles. And I came to Ross really because of their focus on social impact and how that spans, I thought, across the university and across Ross. That really spoke to me, and I'm involved in Open Road as well with AVA and also Emerging Markets Club and a few other impact-related things here on campus.
Hi guys, I'm Allie Zimmerman. I was in the education sector before coming back to Ross, the Teach for America core member, and continued on in my career to become a consultant who was opening education nonprofits and charter schools across the country. And when I started looking for a school, Ross was near the top, if not the top of the list, before I came to visit, because of the dedication that the school had to business and impact. And once I got here, I realized that it wasn't just the school, but also the fellow students and the culture and the matching values that I saw with my peers here that made it the best place for me. I'm also a dual degree student at the Ford School, so getting my master's of public policy also.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. And you'll hear from them throughout. As I just wanted to touch on before we sort of dive in some of the key themes you're going to hear today. One is that Ross was kind of proud to put together 100 different ways to get involved in the impact community as a student here at Ross. We'll probably touch on about 15 to 20 of those, but given we only have an hour, we're not going to get to all 100. I will send those out as a follow-up email, as I think it's like really great to get a snapshot of that and look through all of those resources. So keep that in mind. We're also going to talk a lot about funding and support specifically for impact-related careers and how many diverse ways there are to receive funding or different support, not just say from a class or from a certain company. And along those lines, also the idea of Go Blue, Go Anywhere. We have 65% of our class going to the East Coast, the West Coast, or Chicago. And Michigan has the most alumni in the world. So thinking about how the alumni impact the impact landscape and how that helps you enter that world, I think that's a big part of what we're going to talk about today. Thinking about impact itself, impact takes many different forms. There's the impact consulting role. And whether that's, strategy and innovation, traditional consulting, or, sort of the nonprofit consulting world, there's also this spans many different industries. So, that involves healthcare, energy and sustainability, education, consumer goods, just to name a few. So there's, many different industries at Ross that people are involved in impact. And then there's also the ecosystem here within the school. So that includes, the incubators and accelerators, the nonprofits and foundations that are part of the city or the school and the public sector around us. And then finally, there's also, the social enterprise and impact world that you'll hear a little bit more about how Ross connects with that as well. So, and then, if you might have heard about the MAP program here at Ross, for those of you who haven't, and this, maybe your first time listening to what Ross is like, MAP is sort of the signature and capstone of your first year here at Ross. There is really nothing else like it across the MBA landscape, where you actually spend the last 7 weeks of your first year full-time consulting for either a large Fortune 500 company or NGO around the world. You're solving a business challenge exactly as a consultant would for those companies with a faculty advisor throughout those 7 weeks and a small team with your classmates. This is really the highlight of, I think, your first year as an MBA at Ross. And MAP is really important to impact-related conversations, because there are a number of our students who might be recruiting for traditional business roles and use MAP as an immersive way to get involved in that scene and thinking about how it impacts their long-term goals, or just having that experience in a unique way, sort of like a second internship. On the flip side, those who are really committed, I think, to getting into the impact world really see this as a great way to make contacts, expand their network, and bolster what they can share in recruiting. So I just pulled out here, what I thought were about 6 or so projects of highlights from last year that were in the impact space. There are actually probably about 20 to 25 to choose from. But as you could see, our students put together a digital marketing campaign, like a remake of a strategy for the Make-A-Wish Foundation in Phoenix. We had a team of students in Malawi working with a startup drone firm that was delivering medical goods via drones and working with them on a go-to-market strategy in Malawi. We had a project working with Banyan Global, which is a consulting firm in DC. It was a USAID project, but they were working with midwives in Ghana and helping to create a sustainable financial model for those midwife homes in Ghana. There was also a group of our students working with the Global Fairness Initiative in Nepal and working to source a better model for the bricklaying culture in Nepal and trying to rid itself of child labor and other practices that were inappropriate there. And then finally, there was also a project with Ocean Conservancy in Jamaica and China. This was a pretty cool project, and there's people are cleaning up the oceans and recyclables and plastics there, but actually working on creating the upstream for those plastics so that they're put to use into products and what that looks like. And then I'll actually ask Colleen, because Colleen was on the project in Egypt with CARE International, to share some thoughts about what that experience looked like.
Thanks. Yeah, even hearing you talk about all of these other projects got me so excited again. I loved MAP. I had an incredible time. Definitely a differentiator for me, at least at coming to Ross. But my experience, so there were a team of 4 of us, and our project was sponsored by the William Davidson Institute here at Michigan, and they sponsor a handful of MAPs typically in developing countries. And we were working with CARE, who was an implementing partner for Danone, or in the US known as Dannon. And Dannon was looking for ways to collect a higher quantity and a higher quality of milk from smallholder farmers in rural Egypt. And so our team was tasked with visiting a few of the milk collection centers that CARE had set up and figuring out how we could optimize their operations in order for Dannon to get more milk from the farmers and increase their income. And so it was a really good opportunity for us to put skills from our core classes to use and from our elective classes that we took the first year. And we spent 3 weeks in country, and it was just so incredible. And we are such good friends and had a really good time. And it really laid the foundation for me, I think, to be successful in my internship as well. And about a month ago, one of our contacts from CARE Egypt emailed us and said she was implementing the scaling model that we put together from our business plan and asked for 1 or 2 additional resources for something. And we were all very excited to hear how successful it's been so far and how excited they are to continue working on it.
Awesome. Thanks, Colleen. That's such a good description of so many of the themes that are the goal of MAP, right? It's just like we want to see the core applied and how those business, themes we talk about in the core curriculum come out in practice. And that's the idea of MAP, but also the relationships you've made with your fellow students. But then also, you didn't just like deliver a presentation and walk away, but there was actually, your efforts are being acted upon and have made a difference. So that's, everything that MAP's about. So thanks for sharing that. I should mention the Ross experience actually kicks off with the Sanger Impact Challenge. We have a traditional orientation, like any school would, to set you up for your experience, but the bulk of orientation is actually spending a 4-day immersive exercise with your section. So your section is the cohort you will go, like a sort of your family within the family that you'll go through the core curriculum with. And your section will be tasked with making an impact for a local business or organization in Detroit. So I actually volunteered at the event my wife worked on a few years back, where they put on a back-to-school fair for 3,500 Detroit elementary school students and put together different learning opportunities and experiences to impact the community, before school began. This year, our students worked with about 15 to 20 different local food entrepreneurs in Detroit, and were paired with different entrepreneurs to put together to help, either with their marketing plan or help their business strategies. So it gives you an idea of, it isn't something we just give lip service to when we talk about impact, but it's something that every one of our MBA students will interact with, right from the beginning here at Ross. The next big thing for in the impact space that, I think is, I often tell people when I'm on the road that this is, one of the most meaningful extracurricular activities we have here at Ross. I feel really strongly about it. Ross is home to the nation's first ever student-led impact investing fund. We have 5 different funds here at Ross. It's sort of, how the action-based learning comes together in the venture capital and entrepreneurial scene. And the Social Venture Fund is making significant investments in companies that believe in the triple bottom line. Before I say much else, I should let Allie talk about it because Allie has a leadership role with Social Venture Fund this year.
Sure. So Social Venture Fund, we were the first impact investing fund led by any school, and we've been around for about 8 or 9 years now. We have 8 investments in our portfolio and are working on our 9th this year. So this year I'm our portfolio director, which means that I manage the relationships with all of our current portfolio companies and also our evaluation and ongoing support of those companies. One of the unique things about Social Venture Fund is that we don't just invest, but there's opportunities for students to practice the finance skills they're getting, the M&O skills that they're getting from the core. Sometimes we're even getting into more of the strategy side when we do our consulting projects. So that is sort of the equal weighting to actually the financial support that we're giving these companies. Every year we do one $50,000 donation for an early stage company. We know that that's pennies, and the real value that we add as MBAs and BBAs actually is the support we can give them on our portfolio consulting projects. So we're really excited about that. We just recruited for our leadership team, we recruited the new class for this year, and we have about 18 newbies who are going through our own version of education sessions where we bring together the core into what you need to know to be a VC. It's been one of my most meaningful, if not most meaningful experience at Ross. And last year, we actually took it one step further and went to one of the national competitions called Mint, where we took home the best due diligence of any fund and any school who was participating. And I'm sure, as you were, there were a lot of the schools that I had thought about attending, so it was really nice to come out on top in that environment.
I love the competitive streak.
Just a little competitive.
But thanks for that. That's a really good overview of what's an incredibly immersive experience. So I definitely encourage those of you listening who are excited to hear about Social Venture Fund to reach out to other members on the team. But I think, Social Venture Fund is such a great example of seeing action-based learning come to life. If you're thinking about what raising capital might mean, what due diligence is in the impact space, and what that would look like, you get to actually do that here at Ross. So I love talking about that, so thank you for that. Moving along, there's also the Detroit Revitalization and Business Club. To tee this up, I actually tell prospective students all around the world that the Detroit Revitalization Business Club is one of the most popular non-professional clubs at Ross, even though over 95% of our students come from outside of Michigan. I think that speaks to what our students care about and what matters. But it's probably not a surprise to anybody listening in, to talk about revitalizing Detroit and what Detroit's going through, and of course, it's a really great sort of incubator and connection to the university, and the university itself has made an investment in Detroit, but so are our students. And so the Detroit R&B Club actually sponsors 5 different sort of like community consulting projects each year for students to get involved in if they're interested in. I'll just highlight one for the interest of time, but there's an organization called Upvote, which is an ideation tool from the community development sector of Detroit. And it's a web-based tool that actually, citizens in a community can vote for the best ideas and help businesses and what ideas would help the community. And then it sort of designs a community crowdfunding campaign for those ideas. So it sort of combines design thinking and, gets members of the community involved, and our students will be working on them to help with how to design their product better and what the community process flow will look like. So I found that really interesting. Allie also worked on the annual R&B conference this year, so I'll ask her to just share a couple of highlights from that conference.
Yeah, so I was one of the co-chairs of the conference, and actually my other co-chair was a BBA, and I can't stress how impressive BBAs are and how much I've learned from them, even as an MBA. I think it's really interesting and unique the way that we get to work with those folks. So you should start thinking of them as your equals now. I know I came in thinking, oh, these undergrads, but they are so impressive. And you know, that's one of the things about Detroit R&B is that it really is about community, both our community here at Ross, but also our community in Detroit down the road. And so our goal for the conference this year was to talk about all of the innovation that's happening in the city, both from a business side, but also from a policy side, from a real estate development side, trying to figure out with our students here where they can actually plug in the future also. So our goal is not that we move people from Ross into Detroit to work necessarily, but that people understand what the city is, well, really what the city is and where it's going and how you may want to participate in that process. We had an amazing group of speakers, which led incubators, accelerators. We had people from the mayor's office. We had some of the largest real estate developers join us. And, you know, they were really excited to hear from our students and the questions that we had. And it was actually a great open dialogue, which is exactly what our goal is with Detroit R&B.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I would also echo, just as a significant other and staff member here, I think the two most meaningful speakers I can remember that I attended personally came from the R&B conference. I went to a session a couple of years ago on privilege and what that looked like, facilitated by a leader in Detroit that was incredibly memorable. So it's definitely a highlight on the calendar every year. Next is talking about Ross Open Road. I love talking about Open Road on the road all the time. I think we have two people in the room who participate in Open Road, but for those of you who don't know, Ross Open Road actually came out of a program that used to be called MBAs Across America and was done by many of the schools you might be looking at, many MBA programs. And that program no longer exists, but Ross and the Center for Social Impact felt so strongly about the program that there's actually funding from the school and local corporate sponsors to keep Open Road going. Because Ross kind of ends a little early on the calendar with your classes, you have time for some either fun or a second internship of sorts in May, and Open Road can be that. So I'll let Ava take it from here. You can see her front and center holding a flag in Fargo, I believe you were, to describe more of what Open Road's like.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, as we mentioned, Colleen and I both did Open Road. We were on two separate teams. The idea behind Open Road is because in the business school environment, you tend to work with the large corporations and big companies. We wanted to have a way to sort of give back to the smaller businesses and social enterprises. And so the idea is it's a road trip. Basically, we got into a minivan here in Detroit. We worked with, my team worked with 4 different small businesses across the country. We went from Detroit to Fargo, Fargo to Bozeman, Montana, and ended up in Orange County, California, over a month-long road trip. And each week we spent about 4.5 days sort of cranking out some kind of a meaningful project for our small business owners. So we got to know them before we went on the trip, and then it was sort of a very short but impactful mini consulting engagement. And it was not just learning from using our skills that we got from the first year, but it was also a bonding experience. It was getting to meet all these entrepreneurs in all these different cities, getting to meet other entrepreneurs in that same landscape. So we got to actually use our MBAs towards something other than just what people typically stereotype as big companies.
Yeah, I love hearing about Open Road. I've gone to hear the presentations from the teams and learn about the entrepreneurs they've worked with around the country. It's amazing how much ground you guys covered. And Allie was just asking to join next year because it sort of has a reputation here at Ross as being one of the coolest experiences that you can take part of. And if you're interested in social entrepreneurship in any way, I think there's really no better way to get a feel for that through this experience with classmates who feel the same way. I want to quickly touch on what clubs look like at Ross and how they're helpful in this process. There are a number of professional clubs that really help you in the impact space. Some of those include the Emerging Markets Club, Education Plus Business, the Net Impact Club, and the Ross Energy Club. It's important to know Ross isn't just, a factory for consultants and bankers. I really feel strongly that there's a number of industries here and students here who don't feel like they're a niche. There's support, and a lot of that comes from these clubs. You can see, if you talk to leadership positions who are part of these clubs, you'll hear that story over and over. All these clubs, I believe, plan treks also to key companies in their industry. So getting an up-close, behind-the-scenes look at the key players and alumni and recruiters at organizations or companies in those fields. Ross, we could spend the rest of the hour talking about why Ross is different as an immersive experience and what that allows you to do being here in Ann Arbor in terms of really getting everything out of your 2 years as an MBA. But, something I always remind students is skill development clubs are really important at Ross, and people take as much advantage of those as they do a traditional class. So, there are a number of skill development clubs. We've talked about the Detroit Revitalization Business. There's also the Community Consulting Club, which are other traditional consulting projects here in Ann Arbor. The Design Plus Business Club works on design thinking and how that can make an impact. And you heard about the Social Venture Fund. So just wanted to give you an overview of what that looks like. On a similar note, there's a number of centers and institutes that represent the thought leadership or support here at Ross for those interested in making an impact. I won't say much about the Center for Social Impact right now because you'll hear about that in a little bit. But I want to quickly touch on the Urb Institute. The Urb Institute is housed here at Ross and works to coordinate a dual degree between the School of Sustainability and Environment and Business. It was the first degree of that sort, started in the 90s. So, the Ross alumni community in the sustainability scene is particularly well known. We have the Zell Lurie Institute for Entrepreneurship on campus, and they have some special funding for starting your own venture that would make an impact, and I'll describe those in a bit. We have the Center for Positive Organization. The world's leading research on what organizational culture looks like and how that manifests itself in successful companies is here at Ross. I know for my wife, this was a highlight of her experience taking classes from those faculty and engaging in some of their workshops and speakers. And then finally, the William Davidson Institute is entirely focused towards research and special projects on the base of the pyramid and emerging markets. So a lot of resources through them as well. Just as a visual, I thought it'd be really helpful to see where some Michigan alums and particularly Ross alums are, whether it be the big time consulting firms, the Bridgespan Group in the nonprofit scene, or the traditional big consulting firms. You see some key energy companies here. You see the Gates Foundation. You see some really interesting sustainability roles, some other, venture capital or impact investing types of firms. Again, having the most alumni in the world and having such a diverse alumni base, both in terms of location and interest, is something that really, really helps you in the impact scene. I always tell people that where that comes up most, I feel, is making an impact in sports, is like the network of who you know and how you get into it. So just getting a feel for that is, you can see here. On a similar note, we have some great recent placements in different fields. Like I said, there's a number of different industries at play here, but you can see, some of where our recent MBAs have gone. Colleen's leading a fact group here and was able to successfully get a great internship in the impact community. So can you talk about what fact groups are like and how that helped you in navigating the network?
Definitely. So FACT groups, it stands for Functional Accountability Team. And there are leaders who are MBA 2s, or in some cases 3s, and they lead small student groups to walk you through building out your resume, writing cover letters, telling your Odyssey, which is, kind of a 3-minute pitch about yourself, and really even how to get started in the recruiting process. So these range from, your traditional consulting or banking fact groups to a social impact fact group, an off-campus fact group, a tech fact group, entrepreneurship, all kinds of things. And so last year I was in the social impact fact group, and we had a very diverse group of students because impact can be very broad, and that was incredibly helpful in learning about different industries and functions. And my fact leader was actually the person who ended up getting me my internship at Room to Read this summer. She knew someone who worked there and put me in touch, and really helped me sort of get a foot in the door there. And I'm leading the social impact fact group this year, and hopefully I can do, be somewhat of a similar resource to the MBA ones this year. But the fact groups in general are just a really great opportunity to meet people who are interested in similar things to you, and to have someone guide you through the recruiting process.
Awesome, thanks. I mean, I think fact groups make a difference in many different industries at Ross, and all of our students are really grateful for them. But I think particularly, in a sector where, off-campus recruiting might be important and relationships are really important, it's really nice to have that support from your classmates going through the recruiting process. So thanks for that. Just wanted to quickly touch on funding opportunities, because that's obviously a really important piece of this conversation. There is the Zell Lurie Institute has special internship funding for working either at a local startup company or working on your own business as an internship. So if you wanted to put that together as a way of personally making an impact, there is special funding for that. The Center for Social Impact has Impact Corps internships where they specifically provide funding so that you have a similar compensation and salary for the summer and can still work in a role that you're really passionate about and make an impact. The William Davidson Institute does very similar funding called Global Impact Fellowships for having an internship in an emerging market somewhere around the globe and having a similar salary as well. So there's special fellowships for travel and salary to do that. And then something you probably are thinking about or will be thinking about after you get admitted, and you have to think about tuition. But the Ross School does provide loan repayment assistance for up to 8 years, I believe. So an annual award of funding for anybody working in the nonprofit sector or a government role. The awards range typically anywhere from like $2,000 to $8,000 a year. The average is about $5,000 a year. So if you were to receive that, say, over 8 years, it's a significant amount of money and can really make a difference. And the last thing on here, Ava's actually co-leading the Give a Day Fund. Can you describe what that is?
Sure. So actually, I think all three of us are recipients of the Give a Day Fund.
Thank you.
So the Ross Give a Day Fund was started in 2012. It's one of the first amongst its kind in business schools, and the idea is your classmates who might be going to the more traditional roles, consulting, finance, whatever it might be, that are getting the higher salaries, contribute 1 day's worth of their salary towards a pool of money that then is used to help fund scholarship, sort of grants, basically, for people that are going into internships that either pay nothing or pay quite below the normal MBA range. And every year we have people that apply sort of a later in the year thing, more like March, April timeframe. And there's a board, I'm on the board this year to help decide for this incoming class. But I think all of us here, we're grateful for receiving whatever we could sort of help us get through the summer.
Awesome. A fantastic program. And as you can see, like many students here get to take advantage of it. And I think it's indicative, again, of what the Ross student body is like. With that, I'm going to introduce, we have one more special guest in the room. The Center for Social Impact is an integral part of the Ross community. So I have Glenn Bugala with us, who helps with the Center for Social Impact, and I'll let Glenn share a little bit more about the center.
Yeah, hi, Glenn Bugala, Marketing Director and Communications Director at the Center for Social Impact. It's a unique center among business schools, one of the first of its kind, and our goal is to place students in placements where they can be inspired to solve complex social challenges. And that means not just swooping in and swooping out, but actually taking actions that are going to make a difference in the communities where they're placed. Moving forward, we do that through cross-sector leadership. So we encourage teams to be made up of students from multiple schools across campus. We find that the knowledge that's shared and learned in the teams that are multidisciplinary is stronger and more powerful for the groups with which we partner. We're also all about action-based learning, placing students in the real world, working on real social issues. And we hope to not only draw in students who may not have initially considered social impact as a career opportunity, but also give plenty of opportunities to those students who know that they want to go into a career in social impact. And ultimately to make a positive, lasting change in the communities where they work. You've heard a lot already, so I'll try to be brief about some of our programs. You did not hear about the board fellowship program. We just had training and orientation for this. We partner with local nonprofits, and we place students as non-voting members on the boards of these nonprofits during the entire school year. It's a long commitment. It ends in April. Students also work on a board level project for that nonprofit. So this is not an internship, this is a board fellowship. And the thinking behind it is a little larger than perhaps a typical internship position. Next, we have the Social Impact Challenge. We will partner with some groups of community leaders, businesses, social entrepreneurs in Detroit to work on a specific issue. A couple of years back, you see some photos here. We worked on how to resolve how Detroit PAL, or Detroit Police Athletic League, was going to utilize the old Tiger Stadium space in Corktown. So we partnered with community leaders there and the police department to have students work on a sustainable vision for an after-school sports program. This year, I can sort of tip our hand. We're looking to work with U of M Dearborn or the Poverty Initiative here at U of M on a project in Detroit. More on that to come when the challenge is officially released. Moving forward, social entrepreneurship. You heard a little bit about Ross Open Road and some of our internships. I'll let that description stand on its own. And I will talk about the Michigan Business Challenge Siegel Impact Track. This is a program run by Zell Lurie with support from the Center for Social Impact and the Herb Institute for Sustainability. And students can create either nonprofits or for-profit social enterprises, and winners partake in a prize pool of $26,000 to support their businesses going forward. U of M has at large offered a lot of support to student enterprises across all disciplines and across all departments and schools. But this program brings many of those students together, and it is extremely popular. This takes place between November and February. And then a new initiative I want to talk to you about, which the Center for Social Impact has a close relationship to. Last year, at the end of last year, beginning of this year, Scott Drew, our dean, created an associate deanship and studio based around the idea of business plus impact. And this is designed to advance the positive impact that business can have in global society. Associated with this studio, which is currently being developed, is a new, by student demand, business impact portal at rossimpact.com. this portal is available to you as a prospective student. I welcome you to look around here, take a look at some opportunities to connect with colleagues, get an idea of some events across campus, some co-curricular student challenges and programs that you can get involved with, clubs and courses in the subject area of impact. So do take a look at this portal. It's extremely valuable. It's being updated daily. It is current. It is fact-based. I mean, we are listing courses that are actually being offered, not being talked about being offered. So it's a place to go if you want to find out what the landscape is like for impact at U of M.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. That's a really helpful overview of the center. I can't recommend the portal enough. If it's not obvious in the past 40 or so minutes, there's a lot of different programs and opportunities here. That's a good problem to have, but it can be hard to wrap your head around, like, when would I do all these things and what would my schedule look like, and, you know, how just mapping that out. And I think going into the portal and actually, you know, visualizing some of it and seeing how different things are connected would be really helpful. So I'll be sure to send that link out after. With that, we're going to open it back up to questions for the next 10 or 15 minutes. So please submit your questions as we go. One thing I was thinking about as we were sharing stories and talking about all the different resources, we've used the word interdisciplinary a few times, and I think that's really important when you think about why Ross has a strength in the impact area. For those of you who don't know, Ross is home to over 100 top 10 graduate degree programs. There's only 2 other schools in the world that can say that, and you're part of this larger ecosystem where you can really tap into that. All Ross students can actually take about 3 classes at other schools as part of their Ross degree, whether it be the School of Public Health or the School of Environment and Sustainability or the School of Public Policy, which is a fantastic program. Allie, do you want to share just quickly, when you, how the dual degree has helped you and how you approach that and how you've seen, interdisciplinary things come together through your time here?
Sure. So I started 3 years ago, and I started at the Ford School. So I did a full year at the Ford School before coming to Ross for my MBA years. And going through that experience of going deep on public policy, on issues that are affecting our society here in the U.S. and abroad, I think it made me a better business student when I got to Ross, because I was looking through that lens at the world, and I saw not only the role of the private sector, but also saw the whole ecosystem and the world that we're working in a little bit more broadly. As I continue to take classes over there, I'm continue to be pushed by my peers from all these different programs to think in different ways. And I think that, that's a really unique aspect of being a dual degree student, is having this community where you can both rely on those people, but also for support, but also for that push that you need to say, hey, I think you're thinking too much like a business student right now.
Yeah.
Or vice versa, right? And it's a great way to meet the people that you are going to participate in some of these interdisciplinary programs with. So I did the Social Impact Challenge, the Center for Social Impact, 2 years ago with a team that was folks from public health, public policy, and Ross. And it was an amazing experience where we actually got to put into practice a lot of those learnings that we were taking from each of our different programs.
Awesome. That's a really helpful insight. So one question we got from the audience, so the audience can see on the screen, all 3 of you got really successful internships, at organizations, in the impact space. Hopefully you had a great experience. We could talk about the experience itself a bit more, but in terms of what recruiting looked like for impact, it's something that's probably a little bit different than, say, traditional consulting recruiting here at Ross. And we touched on fact groups and what that looked like. We touched on funding in terms of salaries, but in terms of actually getting that job and what the resources were, can you guys, any of you, talk about your experiences, advice you'd have, and what that looks like?
I'll talk about that. This is Colleen. So I interned at Room to Read in San Francisco this summer. It's an international development nonprofit focused on education. And I would say, generally speaking, the timeline for impact recruiting is very different from traditional recruiting. My advice would be to sort of get your foot in the door early. So try to build connections with people in the fall. Maybe in October and November, you're having info chats, doing 15, 20-minute phone calls with people, trying to understand different organizations and roles within those organizations. And impact recruiting tends to do just-in-time hiring versus this sort of earlier on traditional recruiting process, where many peers would be submitting applications in December and interviewing in January, for example. My timeline, I was sending out emails to organizations starting in October, having phone calls with people through April. I got an offer in January. I ended up turning it down and waiting for something else, which was maybe a bold move, but I knew that it wasn't quite the right fit. And so I had a few more interviews in March, actually, while I was in Egypt, which was fun, and ended up getting my offer in April. And so it's a different timeline. I personally loved doing impact recruiting because it comes with a lot of flexibility and a lot of self-control. So I was able to kind of reach out to whatever organizations I wanted to on my own timeline. And that was very freeing for me. I don't know if either of you have other.
I'd like to add one more thing. So my experience was slightly different, but completely agree with what Colleen said. We actually were in the same batch group last year as well. There are also some companies that do at least advertise or market through Net Impact, for example. That's how I found my internship through Red F. They don't necessarily, some of these impact organizations don't necessarily come to campus. A few of them actually do, though, especially if they're local. I think Education Pioneers is one national one that comes on campus. And then Red F had advertised through Net Impact. And so through that, I found out about their webinar and attended it. And that's kind of the process that I followed.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that I wanted to work in an impact-driven organization, but not necessarily a nonprofit, because I had worked in nonprofits before and wanted a new experience. And so there are lots of organizations that do come on campus that have sort of herb-focused internships. Walmart is one of the big ones that does. And so you can find roles like that. My internship with Win-Win was a little bit different. And just to go off of what Colleen was saying, a lot of this is about relationship building and the relationships you have even here at Ross. And so I was able to find my internship through a recommendation from a professor who knew what my interests were. And when someone approached him to say, hey, who do you think would be interested in working at a social enterprise that's focused on, cross-sector facilitation, he was like, well, this sounds like you. And so I think from the moment you get on campus, you're not only building relationships with your peers and the people who you meet in clubs and in your section, but also with professors, whether it's through a club or through a class, they do care and are paying attention when you talk to them.
Yeah, that's awesome. As you can see, it's sort of, mixing a multitude of different resources, both faculty, your peer network, your own network, and the different co-curricular activities you've been a part of. We also do have a specific impact career coach who you can have individualized appointments with and help you through the process. So there is our career services support for impact roles as well. How about shifting gears a little bit, talking about academics a little bit more specifically? We talked about what a dual degree looks like and how you can take classes across campus. So we got two different questions, but I'll kind of bucket them together. If you had any, very impact-focused classes that you took that have really stood out to you and made a difference, and then was it infused in any way in the core or like in more traditional academic experiences that you would have appreciated?
I can start with the classes, and I think I want Colleen to add on to this because she's TA for one of them this year. So there were two classes that I think stood out to me. I took one in my first year as an elective. It was a nonprofit board governance class. I had kind of worked with the board prior to business school, but I didn't really understand the sort of processes around what it means to be on a nonprofit board. And this class is actually in tandem with the board fellowship. And that class taught me a lot of like what are good policies and not such good policies to keep in mind when trying to form a board and trying to keep, and then the second class I took was this past quarter, and it was sort of a nonprofit consulting class, if I can call it that. We basically had 6 different executives come in from different organizations across the US that were looking to solve some sort of a challenge. And in class, this was one of those multidisciplinary classes with students from all across campus. And we would just sort of throw out, first we sort of brainstorming kind of challenges, and then we gave out suggestions, and it's sort of like a design thinking, consulting, kind of all thrown in together. And it was I think I got a lot out of that class.
Cool. I will add to that. So there are 2 classes that I took last year that were sort of impact focused that also really supported me in, I guess, my 3 internships at MAP, Open Road, and at Room to Read. The first is offered in Fall B. It's the Strategies for the Base of the Pyramid class taught by Ted London. And that class examines a lot of cases relating to emerging economies. So we talk about bed nets for malaria in various countries in Africa. We talk about Cemex, which is a big company, and their operations in Mexico. And we also have guest speakers come into that class who are running operations in different countries. And similar to what Ava was saying, this class gives you the opportunity to hear about a challenge that they're facing and then sort of workshop through different solutions and then presenting that to them within the class. So a couple of the class sessions are 3 hours and they allow for that time. And the second class is Social Entrepreneurship, which is taught in Winter A. And when I took it, it was taught by Chris White. Sometimes it's co-taught with Jerry Davis as well. And that class is a lot about how to make an impact in an organization when you don't necessarily have formal authority to do so. And it's a lot of networking in terms of how can you build out a network, what does a network map look like within a company, and how can you sort of use that to get different messages across or to get a sustainability initiative in place. And we also had executives come into that class and talk to us with different challenges that they were facing as well, and kind of a similar process. And I think that both of those were really instrumental in my experiences after that. I used the Social Entrepreneurship class specifically very heavily in MAP in terms of mapping out the network of farmers and how you could get a new idea across, as well as through my other summer experiences.
Cool. That's a great example. Thank you for that, guys. There's a couple of quick hitters here. I'll just answer myself real quickly. You do select a choice of 15 different MAP projects that you're interested in working on. About half of them must be domestic and half must be international. 95% of our students receive one of their top 5 choices. So you can really front load, projects that are impact focused or, even international as well, to ensure that you have one of those experiences. And we can definitely, there's a recording of a webinar solely on MAP and what that process looks like that you can listen to as well if you have more questions. The other thing is your second year at Ross is entirely design your own path. So you can get a concentration in something, say sustainability. You can do a dual degree, and that might add a third year, but there's a lot of flexibility in building that out. And so you can absolutely have multiple concentrations and take different classes across campus. We have time for maybe 1 or 2 more. Just one that came to mind is we covered so much ground. There's so many different resources. All of you are participating in a good number of these, but not all of these activities. Like when you were here in your first couple of weeks, any tips for, figuring out what would be the most meaningful to your career goals and how you approach that and how you've narrowed down your commitments or worked on that?
I can start. I'm sure we all had a little bit of a different strategy. So coming in to school, I knew where my strengths lied, and I knew what I really wanted to work on, both from a skills and an exposure perspective. And I took the time to think about that over the summer. And so when it came to meet the clubs and what can you do here, I sat down and looked at all the things that sounded interesting to me, which were way more hours than I could ever have to spend. and figured out which was going to plug into one of those things I wanted to learn. And then I also decided there still has to be something that lets me show and live my passion and what I know gives me sort of the strength to do all the other things and to go through this really hard learning process. And so because of that, I ended up, doing Detroit R&B, where I really am committed to urban revitalization and understanding a city and helping to build a future. So that was one of my passion projects. Whereas, doing Social Venture Fund, from someone who had never done anything in finance, never done any sort of venture capital, I knew that that was going to be a really hard core learning experience. And so made that a huge priority when I was debating what to do.
Makes sense.
The advice that I got coming in that I still try to recall every once in a while is it's definitely a balance between three buckets. I would say academics, career, and like social activities or co-curriculars. And for me, what that looked like was I signed up for a few clubs in the beginning, but I focused on academics for Fall A because I didn't come in with a business background and I wanted to sort of focus on those skills. And then after Fall A, I spent more time on the sort of co-curricular side and doing, like Ali was talking about, the passion project. So I was heavily involved in Emerging Markets Club, and I got more into that. And then it was like, for me, Winter A was more recruiting. So that was kind of how I balanced it and decided when to be more involved in some things than others. And that's going to look different to everybody.
Yeah, I think one other thing is when I was writing my essays, I had kind of already mapped out certain areas of interest. I did not follow through with all of them, but I started off with that group that I was interested in. I was able to narrow it down. So, for example, Ross Open Roads and the Give a Day Fund were two things that I had highlighted that I definitely wanted to do, and they came kind of later in the year. So, kind of similar to Colleen, I also focused my first Fall A getting used to classes and just being in a new environment and having roommates and all that. And then as I got more comfortable, I sort of added on activities.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Incredible experiences you've shared, covered a lot of ground. So I appreciate all the panelists and staff. As we've touched on a few times, I think there's a lot to cover here. So I will definitely share out some important links so that you can sort of dive in, particularly the Impact Portal, and get a sense for all of this. Some of the things we've talked about today, whether it was a map project that really stood out to you or one of the clubs here at Ross, there are people who want to share their experiences. Part of what we love so much about Ross is there's truly a pay-it-forward culture. And somebody who shared these experiences with all the people you heard from today a couple of years ago to help them make the right decision and give them advice. So please take advantage of that. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you all soon here in Ann Arbor. Go Blue.
Go Blue.